I should have left the package on the porch. I should have turned around, gotten back in my truck, and driven away. But I didn't. And that was my biggest mistake. It was a rainy October evening in North Carolina, just past 10 p.m. My last delivery for the night, a single package to a trailer home at the end of a dirt road. The place was isolated, surrounded by thick, tangled woods. No street lights, no cars, just a rusted mailbox with peeling numbers, barely visible under the flickering porch light. The kind of place that makes you feel like you're the only person left in the world. I pulled up, engine rumbling in the quiet. The trailer was old, the kind of home that looked like it had been sitting there for decades. The windows were covered, not with blinds, with thick blankets. And the door? It had 3 deadbolts. I remember thinking, who the hell needs that many locks out here? I stepped out of the truck, package in hand. Then, before I could knock, the door creaked open. A woman peeked out. She was thin, too pale, with deep lines around her eyes. Her gray hair was pulled into a messy bun, and her hands were shaking. She looked tired. No, not tired. Scared. She glanced behind me, into the woods, then back at my truck. "Is it just you?" she asked. Something about her tone made my stomach tighten. I cleared my throat. Yeah, just a package for you, ma'am." She didn't reach for it. Instead, she looked down the hallway behind her. Then, in a whisper, "Can you bring it inside?" I hesitated. I wasn't supposed to go inside people's houses. Company policy. But something about the way she asked, I don't know. It felt like she was in trouble. Like she was trying to tell me something without saying it. So, against my better judgment, I stepped inside. And the second I did, she slammed the door shut. The air inside was thick, damp, stale. The place was a mess. Stacks of newspapers, old plates, boxes piled against the walls. The only light came from a single lamp in the corner, casting long, eerie shadows. But the worst part? Every window was covered. Not just with blinds, with nailed-down blankets. I swallowed hard. Something wasn't right. She grabbed my arm. Her grip was stronger than I expected. Her eyes darted toward the hallway. Then, she whispered, "Don't move too much. They hear movement." A cold chill crawled up my spine. I didn't ask who they were. Didn't want to know. Then, I heard it. A rustling sound, coming from the back room. My pulse hammered. "Ma'am," I said, keeping my voice steady, "you got someone else here with you?" She didn't answer. She just stood there, staring at me, waiting. Then, from the darkness of the hall, a slow creak, like a door opening. And in that instant, I knew. I needed to get out. I took a step back, my foot brushing against an empty plate on the floor. The rustling in the back room stopped. The silence that followed was louder than anything I'd ever heard. Then, a whisper, not the woman's. Something else. Low, raspy. "He's seen us." I turned for the door. Didn't care if it was rude. Didn't care if I was overreacting. I needed to leave. I reached for the handle, but the woman grabbed me again. Her nails dug into my skin. "You can't go yet," she whispered. Her eyes were too wide now, too focused on something behind me. I didn't turn around. Didn't want to see whatever was standing in that hallway. I yanked my arm free, shoved the door open, stepped onto the porch, heart pounding. And for just a second, I thought I was safe. But then I heard her say it. Soft, almost pleading. "They're going to follow you now." I jumped into my truck, locked the doors, started the engine, and in my side mirror, I saw something step onto the porch. Something tall, something thin, something not quite human. It wasn't the woman. It wasn't anyone I wanted to see. And its head was tilting too far to the side, like it was listening. I peeled out of there, didn't look back, didn't stop driving until I was hours away. But even then, even now, I still get that feeling sometimes. That feeling that I'm being watched. That feeling that if I ever drive through North Carolina again, I'll see that trailer home waiting for me. And this time, they won't let me leave. I was running on fumes when I spotted the gas station. It was just past 2 a.m., and I was deep in the California desert, miles away from the last town. My GPS claimed the next stop wasn't for another 50 miles. But there it was, a small, run-down station sitting just off the highway, its old neon sign flickering in the dark. I hadn't seen a building for over an hour. So where the hell had this place come from? I slowed down, my tires crunching over the cracked pavement as I pulled into the lot. The place looked abandoned. The windows were covered in grime. The paint on the walls had peeled away in strips, and the two rusted gas pumps looked older than my truck. But the lights were on, and in the window, behind the dirt-streaked glass, I saw someone watching me. I hesitated. Something about this felt wrong. The lot was empty. No other cars. No signs of life. But I needed fuel. So I grabbed the pump nozzle. No credit card slot. Great. Prepay inside. I stepped up to the door, the bell jingling as I walked in. The air inside smelled like dust and old coffee. Shelves stood mostly empty, stocked with expired snacks and faded soda bottles. Behind the counter sat a man. Old, thin, skin tight against his bones. He was watching me, waiting. I cleared my throat. Pump 2. He didn't move, didn't blink, just stared, for an uncomfortably long time. Then, finally, in a voice too dry, too slow, "You shouldn't be here." A chill crawled up my spine. I forced a laugh. "Yeah, well, I need gas." His expression didn't change. "You should leave." His voice was flat, empty, like he wasn't giving advice, like he was giving a warning. I looked around the store. I hadn't noticed it at first, but something was off. There were no prices on anything. The fridge stocked with drinks, unplugged, and the magazines by the register, they were old. Not just a few months, decades. Covers from the 1970s, still stacked neatly like they had just been placed there yesterday. The old man spoke again, his voice lower this time. "You should go. Now." A long silence stretched between us. Then, from outside, I heard the sound of footsteps. Soft, dragging, coming from behind my truck. I turned my head toward the window. The gas station lot was empty. No cars, no people, just my truck, sitting alone under the buzzing lights. Then, in the reflection of the glass, I saw something move. A shape, a tall, thin figure walking along the side of my trailer. Too slow, too smooth, like it was gliding. My breath hitched. I spun around, heart hammering. But when I looked outside, nothing was there. I backed away from the window. The old man was still watching me, still motionless. His eyes were dark, unblinking. I clenched my jaw. "You got security cameras here?" I asked. His thin lips twitched. "They don't show anything." A deep, heavy silence filled the room. I took a slow step toward the door. The old man didn't try to stop me, but just as I reached the exit, he spoke one last time. Soft, almost sad. "If you hear her, don't answer." I didn't ask what he meant, didn't want to know. I pushed the door open and stepped outside, and the air felt wrong. Thicker, like the desert was holding its breath. I walked back toward the truck, my boots echoing too loudly in the stillness. Then, just as I reached the driver's side door, a voice whispered, "Help me." I froze. The voice was soft, a woman's voice, coming from the far side of my truck, from the darkness beyond the gas pumps. "Please," she whimpered. "I need help." Every instinct screamed at me to get in the truck, to leave. But something about the way she spoke, it wasn't right. Too flat, too practiced, like she was repeating a script, like she had said these words 1,000 times before. And the longer I stood there, the more I realized. The air was still silent. No wind, no insects, no sound at all, except for her voice. I gritted my teeth, forcing myself to move. I yanked the door open, climbed into the cab, and locked it. My hands shook as I jammed the keys into the ignition. The second the engine roared to life, a shadow passed by my window. Tall, thin, too fast. I didn't look, didn't check my mirrors. Just threw the truck into gear and peeled out of that lot. The gas station disappeared behind me. The road stretched out, empty and endless. But the unease never left. I drove for almost an hour before I saw another car. By the time I reached a real town, my hands were still shaking. I pulled into a well-lit truck stop, stepped inside, and grabbed a coffee. Then, against my better judgment, I asked the clerk. You know that old gas station down by Route 177? The guy gave me a strange look. There's no station on 177. I frowned. No, I just stopped there. About an hour back. The guy shook his head. Driver, there ain't been a gas station there for 30 years. I left without finishing my coffee. Didn't say another word. Just got back in my rig and drove until the sun came up. I don't stop at lonely gas stations anymore. I don't answer voices that call from the dark. Because now I know, some places on the road aren't meant to exist. And the people you meet there, they don't always leave. The Mojave Desert at night is a place that makes you feel small. No towns, no gas stations, just flat stretches of sand and miles of nothing. I had been driving for hours, the same straight road disappearing into the horizon. No cars ahead, no headlights behind. The only sound was the hum of my engine and the occasional gust of wind rattling against my cab. Then, up ahead, I saw a car sitting in the middle of the road. No lights, no movement, just stopped, completely blocking my lane. I hit the brakes, my tires groaning as I slowed. The car was old, rusted, looked like a 90s Honda Civic, but it was hard to tell. The driver's side door was hanging open, like someone had left in a hurry. And the trunk? It was chained shut, not locked, chained, like someone didn't want whatever was inside to get out. I sat there for a few seconds, staring at it. Something about it felt wrong. Not like a broken down car, not like an accident, more like a trap. I grabbed my CB mic, voice steady. This is Rig 448. I got an abandoned vehicle blocking Route 62, about 20 miles west of 29 Palms. No driver in sight. Anyone near? Silence. Just faint static. Then, a voice crackled through. Low. Uneven. Keep driving. I frowned. Who is this? No response. Just static, stretching into the darkness. Then, from outside, in the desert beyond the car, I heard a gunshot. I ducked down, heart hammering. The sound echoed across the open land, bouncing between the hills. Too close. I scanned the road ahead. Nothing. Then, in the distance, a figure emerged from the darkness. Tall, thin, walking slowly toward the truck. I clenched my jaw, watching as he got closer. He was carrying a rifle. A long one. Hunting rifle, maybe. And even though his face was still hidden in the dark, I knew he was watching me, waiting for me to move. I reached for the gear shift, and the second I did, he ran. I slammed the gas pedal. The truck lurched forward, tires screaming against the pavement. I barely had time to swerve around the car before the guy fired another shot. The bullet pinged against my trailer. Then he was chasing me. I checked my mirrors. The headlights illuminated the road behind me, and the man was still running after the truck. Fast, too fast, and just before I lost sight of him, he smiled. I floored it, pushing the truck past 80. Didn't stop, didn't breathe. I just drove. And for the next 10 miles, I kept expecting another gunshot. Kept expecting to see that abandoned car in my mirrors again. But I didn't. The road stayed empty, like it had never happened at all. I didn't stop until I reached a truck stop outside Barstow. Pulled in, parked, and sat there, shaking. I climbed out, grabbed a coffee, and tried to convince myself I was just seeing things. But then, a guy behind the counter saw my face and frowned. You all right, driver? I hesitated. Then, against my better judgment, I told him. I told him about the car in the road. Told him about the gunshots in the dark. Told him about the man chasing me. By the time I finished, his face was pale. And when I mentioned the chain trunk, he froze. You need to call the cops, he muttered. I frowned. What? Why? He swallowed hard. Because you just described a car that's been missing for 3 years. A cold chill rushed down my spine. I set my coffee down, hands shaking. The guy leaned forward, lowering his voice. 3 years ago, a woman went missing out here. They found her car in the desert, just like you described. Doors open, trunk chain shut, but no body. I felt my stomach drop. The guy with the rifle? I asked. The clerk's face darkened. They never caught him. I left without saying another word. Didn't call the cops. Didn't want to know more. I just climbed back into my rig and got the hell out of Barstow. I don't stop for abandoned cars anymore. I don't check strange noises in the dark. Because now I know. Some people out in the desert don't want to be found. And some of them aren't the ones asking for help. I should have noticed it sooner. Maybe I was too tired. Maybe I was just eager to get back on the road. But looking back, I keep asking myself, how long were they in there before I knew? It started at a rundown gas station in rural Ohio. It was one of those stops that felt off the second I pulled in. The kind of place where the lights barely worked, the pavement was cracked, and the guy behind the counter never looked you in the eye. But I needed fuel. So I stepped out of my rig, stretched my legs, and started pumping. That's when I saw him. A thin guy in a dirty hoodie, standing near the station's dumpster, just watching me. At first, I figured he was just another drifter. Plenty of them pass through places like this. But the longer I stood there, the more uneasy I felt. His posture was too stiff, like he was waiting. Then, as I finished fueling up, he turned and walked away, not toward the road, not toward the store, but toward the back of my trailer. I frowned, stepping forward to get a better look, but by the time I rounded the side of my rig, he was gone. Vanished, like he'd never been there at all. A cold unease settled in my gut. Something about the whole thing felt wrong, but I told myself I was overthinking it. I paid for my fuel, climbed back into the cab, and pulled out onto the highway. And for the first hour, everything seemed normal. Then I heard it, a soft rustling sound, coming from the sleeper cab. My pulse spiked. I kept my eyes on the road, straining to listen. At first, it was faint, barely more than a whisper. Then, something shifted. The distinct sound of fabric moving. Someone was back there. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay calm. I reached for the CB mic, my voice steady. This is Rig 211. I got a situation, unauthorized movement in my cab. Anyone near Route 23? A few seconds of silence. Then, a voice crackled through. Get to a police station. I nodded to myself. Didn't answer. Didn't turn around. Just checked the GPS. Closest station was 30 miles ahead. I pressed the gas pedal harder. Didn't say a word. Didn't check the mirrors. Just focused on the road. But behind me, the rustling continued. They knew I had heard them. I could feel it. The air in the cab felt heavier, tighter, like something was waiting. Then, one of them whispered something, too low for me to hear. Then another snickered, like this was funny to them, like they weren't hiding, like they were waiting for me to notice them. I drove faster. The station was still 20 miles ahead. I kept my foot on the gas, hands tight around the wheel. Then, something moved closer. A shift in weight, the sound of slow footsteps, and then a voice. You should pull over. I didn't. I drove faster. The truck roared down the empty highway. The figures in the sleeper weren't laughing anymore. They were whispering. Then, I heard something click. A sound that made my stomach twist into knots. A knife opening. I spotted the police station before they did. A small brick building on the right, parking lot mostly empty. I didn't slow down. Didn't hesitate. I pulled straight in, slammed the brakes, and threw open the door. The second I hit the pavement, a squad car's lights flashed on. The figures in the back? They didn't even try to run. By the time the officers opened the sleeper cab, all three were sitting there. Still, like they'd been waiting to be caught. One of them, a thin guy with greasy hair, just smiled. And in his hands? A knife. The cops hauled them out one by one, asked me questions, checked my truck. And you know what the scariest part was? None of them had IDs. No wallets. No bags. No trace of who they were. Like they had just appeared. I don't know what they wanted. I don't know why they got in my truck. But the thought that keeps me up at night, the thing that still makes my skin crawl, how long were they in there before I noticed? I don't stop at sketchy gas stations anymore. I don't ignore that gut feeling when something feels wrong. And I sure as hell check my sleeper cab before every trip. Because some hitchhikers don't wait on the side of the road. They wait inside your truck. I was somewhere in North Dakota, hauling a load through an empty stretch of highway with nothing but open land in every direction. No gas stations, no houses, just flat, frozen fields stretching under the glow of my headlights. It was past midnight, and the road was dead silent. Then I saw something lying in the middle of the road. A woman's dress, neatly folded, like someone had placed it there on purpose. I slowed down, my pulse tightening. The fabric was pale, fluttering slightly in the breeze. At first, I thought maybe someone had tossed it from a car. Then, a few yards ahead, I saw a pair of shoes. Small, children's shoes, perfectly lined up, side by side. A cold chill crawled up my spine. I checked my mirrors. The highway behind me was empty. Nothing but the endless dark. I turned my high beams on, and up ahead, lying in the dirt by the shoulder, I saw more clothes. A child's jacket, a single sock, scattered, leading into the tall grass beside the road, like someone had been dragged. I pulled over, my hands gripping the wheel. Something about this felt wrong. I grabbed my flashlight, stepped out of the cab, and into the bitter cold. The wind howled across the open fields. No sound, no movement, just me and the scattered clothes. Then, from somewhere in the distance, I heard a child scream. The sound cut through the night. High, terrified, coming from the tall grass. My breath froze in my throat. Another scream, closer now. I took a step forward. Another. The grass whispered against itself, swaying in the cold wind. Something inside me screamed to go back, to get in the truck and leave. Then, from the darkness, a woman's voice called out, "Help, please, he has my daughter." Every instinct told me this was a trap, but I couldn't ignore that voice. I took another step, shining my flashlight into the grass. The beam barely cut through the shadows. Then, something moved. A shape, low to the ground, crawling. I froze. The woman's voice called out again, desperate now. "Please, he's hurting her." Then the child screamed again, louder, closer, like she was right there in the darkness. I swallowed hard, my hands shaking. I took one more step. Then, my flashlight caught something between the grass blades. A speaker. My blood turned to ice. The screams weren't real. They were recorded, playing on a loop. And in that moment, I knew I wasn't alone. I turned around, heart hammering. A shadow shifted near my truck. A figure, tall, watching. I took a step back, and another shadow moved. Then another. The grass around me stirred. Not from the wind, from something else. Something moving, surrounding me. I didn't think, didn't wait. I ran, bolted for the truck. My boots slammed against the pavement, my breath sharp and ragged. The figures were moving fast now, closing in from both sides. I reached the cab, yanked the door open, and a hand grabbed my wrist. Cold, thin, fingers too long. I ripped free, throwing myself inside and slamming the door. Locked it, turned the key. The engine roared to life. And in my mirrors, I saw them. 4, maybe 5 figures, standing in the grass, not moving, not running, just watching me. Their faces were hidden in the dark, but I could feel it, feel their eyes, like they were waiting for me to step out again. I threw the truck into gear. The tires screeched against the pavement as I tore down the highway. Didn't look back, didn't check the mirrors again, just drove. And over the sound of my engine, I heard something over the CB, a voice, soft, amused. "Next time, stop." I didn't sleep that night, didn't stop driving until I hit a busy truck stop hours later. I pulled in, parked under the brightest lights I could find, tried to steady my breath. Then I checked the local news. No missing children, no kidnappings, no reports of a woman screaming for help. Nothing, like it had never happened at all. I don't stop for strange things in the road anymore. I don't chase sounds into the dark, because now I know, some screams aren't real. They're just bait. And if I had taken one more step, I wouldn't be here to tell the story.